Hello and welcome to Get Involved Referee with Steve Conroy, Dougie Gunning and Des Roach and me, Lindsay Herron. Big show for you today. We've obviously got the Old Firm game to chew over later on in the programme. And of course, the big announcement from the SPFL that VAR will be put to a vote by the member clubs on the 19th of April. We'll touch on that later too, get into the nuts and bolts of that one. But first, let's go back to the Saturday matches, guys, if you don't mind. And we'll start off with Aberdeen's game at Dundee. A couple of big incidents in that one, Steve. I think the main one was, from an Aberdeen point of view, was that Jim Goodwin felt that Charlie Adam was flailing with his elbows and hitting Lewis Ferguson. But you've had a look at it. What do you think?
There was certainly contact in it, but I think Jim has looked at it and slightly blinkered and ignoring the fact that Ferguson had a good handful of Charlie Adams' jumper beforehand. And I know when you heard him on Sportscene, he was kind of scathing of Ferguson. I don't think that there was any intent to hit anybody in the head, or he wasn't leading with the elbow. He was certainly trying to free himself. And I think Charlie Adam, and it might sound wrong, is old enough that if he'd wanted to hit somebody, to hit him properly. But Ferguson, at the end of the day, they were saying there should have been a foul to Aberdeen in the first instance. No, it was the other way about, because the first foul was on Charlie Adam, and I saw it that he was just trying to free himself.
Do you agree with that, Des? Was it more, like Steve says, just Charlie trying to get away from his man?
Yeah, it was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It was a coming together. Lewis Ferguson was clearly pulling his jersey. Charlie's tried to hold him off, is probably the best word. I don't think there was any malicious intent. I don't think there was any real cause for damage. I think it's just one of the ones, right, Phil, if you're going for yellow cards, yeah, but no, just blow the whistle, Phil, get started, play on, and nobody's talking about it.
I was going to say, Doug, it might be the fact that Charlie Adams, it was his pass that set up the equaliser for Dundee late in the game.
Well, yeah, that's probably exacerbated Goodwin. But I think on Stephen Dez's point, he's certainly been pulled back, but that doesn't qualify him to potentially elbow or punch someone in the face if that is what happened. Now, I don't think that is what happened, but being fouled doesn't then justify you to react in a manner that could result in a yellow or red card offence having happened. For me, maybe the referee should have stopped it nice and quick before it escalated into something that could have been a little bit more serious. I do think Adam probably deserved his yellow card for his reaction. I don't think you can justify it just because you were being fouled and the ref hasn't given it. But it was nowhere near an elbow to the face. If at worst it was an overreaction to being pulled back by Ferguson of Aberdeen.
I think it goes back to remember the David Beckham one in France? It was petulant.
Yes.
If anything at all.
Absolutely. Another one in this game, and it's an aspect we don't like. It's the simulation side of things, Steve, and we'll talk about a couple of these actually tonight. But the first one's Vicente Besjuin of Aberdeen, who goes down as if he's been shot by a sniper, and he's lying in a heap, and then all of a sudden when Aberdeen score, you've never seen quicker reactions in your life as he leaps up to celebrate.
Well, there's a few things in there, and it's, I don't know what the word would be, but it was Lazarus was the last one to recover quite as quick as that. But he went down, there was no foul in it, went down again as if he had been elbowed in the face, didn't move. So in the first instance, he was putting his own, he would rather lie there and jeopardise an attack from his own team rather than get up and get on with it. And when you see it not only before when they scored, before when the guys were coming into the box, he moved out of the way. And then when they scored, he made his miracle recovery. It's absolutely shocking. It was disgraceful from beginning to end.
It's I think we said in our chat, it was a resurrection of him at that moment in time. But taking it all back, I mean, he's went down in chapters. He's taken his time to get there. But that's just outright cheating. Absolute cheating. And I really hope that Jim Goodwin has a word with them, and I hope that the player's embarrassed, but I really don't think he will.
Is there any retrospective action, Dougie, that could be taken in that regard then? Are the authorities allowed to
I don't think there's anything retrospectively, but there are misconduct codes that address things like unsporting behaviour or showing a lack of respect for the game. And whether or not that falls into one of those two categories is down to the referee in question's opinion. But every part of me would be looking for a reason to give some sort of sanction for that, because it just leaves a poor taste in your mouth as a supporter of the match watching that game, and as an official, obviously the games we go into, we don't expect them to be easy, but these type of incidents and these reactions make it infinitely harder, and will largely draw referees towards potentially reaching the wrong decision, which just further angers fans, players, pundits and managers alike. If we want to have a game where the referees are better prepared to reach the right decisions and come to the correct outcomes, then that involves the players managing themselves professionally.
Are these directives given at the start of the season as well, though, Steve? Where players are told, look, simulation's not on, you can't do it, cut it out.
Yeah, as you know, the laws of the game are brought out anew every year, and as somebody slagged me off earlier on, it's no longer a book, it's a thing called an app, apparently. So everybody knows, but the Premier teams especially have got absolutely no excuse, because they're all invited to a meeting at Hampden before the start of the season, and whoever's in charge of the referees, it's Crawford just now, is sitting there telling them how it's going to be done. But certainly Maddie, when I went along, there was two of the Cat 1's refs there as well, who spelt it out to them completely. Sadly, not everybody turned up to that meeting, but hell mend them, that's your fault for not going to get it. So they know full well what's meant to happen.
Should the referee have booked Besjuin in that incident for play acting? Ethically and morally, yes, because it's a clear, blatant flout of the laws. More the sporting integrity, I would say, is the one for it. I think it'd be difficult to expect the referee to jump on that, because the goal's been scored, there's lots of things going on, the assistant referee's making sure what's going on in the pitch. It sounds bad to say it. I wouldn't be looking for the referee to be jumping in there. However, I've referenced it there, it's morally and ethically absolute cheating, and the player, they don't care. See, as long as the team win and as long as the team score, they do not care what's going on. They're just looking at the 3 points and a win bonus.
I think that's harsh on the ref. I wouldn't be, certainly if I was reffing it, I wouldn't even have noticed that he had recovered quite so dramatically. And you've got plenty of other things to be getting on with when a goal scored. So ethically, maybe, and I know VAR wouldn't be involved in that kind of situation, but if and when it came in and things develop, who knows, that might be something that gets looked at later on. But as we are now, I don't think the ref could have done anything about that.
No, absolutely not.
Watching it in sports, and he would have hoped he could have done something about it, but he couldn't.
Like we say, we just try and embarrass him into saying that he might not do it again.
Well, hopefully, maybe he listens to this.
In the same vein, there was a similar incident. In fact, two more incidents of the same nature. Firstly, in the Hearts match, where Barrie McKay wins a penalty against Ross County. Connor Randall's the player involved, but you weren't really convinced about that one, were you, Des?
Absolutely not. Absolutely 100%. It is not a penalty kick. It's not a foul. Barrie McKay has went to ground extremely easily. Connor Randall, quite justifiably, is not happy with it. We've looked at the position of Gavin Duncan in it, and it's just one of these ones, in my opinion, that just a bad call. It was not a penalty. There was no contact. Barrie McKay should have been cautioned for simulation, and Gavin Duncan just has to soak that one up.
It's not easy for Ross County. They're fighting to get into the top six, Steve. So when a decision like that goes against them, it's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, no matter who you are, when a decision like that goes against you, it's hard to take. But as we maybe mentioned in some of the other ones, you look at it as well, and players, in my opinion, practice moves like that. There's no way that can come as just a one-off. I'm sure all four of us in here, yeah, if we were, had a defender breathing down your neck, you wouldn't go down like that. You just wouldn't have it in you. So that's practiced, and I think that's the worst thing about it. But yeah, it's a hard one to take, and that is one that VAR would be involved in because of the penalty. So hopefully that'd be one that would be getting reversed, and hopefully Mr. McKay getting his just reward for it as well.
I think the words we're going to come back to, and if VAR does come in, it's clear and obvious. Yeah. And I think that everybody outside Gavin at that moment in time, it was clear and obvious on review.
That's one for the training.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think on your point though, Des, and it is one of the ones that we discussed just before we came on, is around the referee's position. And I know he's not well to the right hand side of it, but I think he thinks the defensive players came across the run of Barrie McKay, and that's obviously what's contributed to the foul. And I think it's one of those ones that unless you're almost directly behind it, it's very difficult to see that clear line, the path of direction, the path of the challenge. And I think he's just, 3 or 4 steps to the right, and he's not moving too much, the referee. I don't think it'd have been too much for him to have moved into a better position, just step to the left to have a look at that, to get the clear view between the players. But he stayed quite static, and I think that's probably restricted having just that completely clear view, and even just being, half a yard or 2 yards to the right-hand side of that challenge slightly obstructs it, and it might look that the leg's just gone across the player. But I think, again, from the angles that we've seen, the TV angles, it's absolutely not a penalty. I think that's something that we can all agree on. But
yeah, absolutely.
I'm quite comfortable giving him a bit of an out on that one.
No, see, I'm not. And I don't want to be critical. It's his job to be in the right position. It's his job to take those two. He shouldn't be static. If the ball's in the penalty area, there's 2 things going to happen. A challenge is going to come in, or a shot at goal is going to come in. So if you're anticipating that, then you've got to be in the right position to try and call it. And it's not being critical of Gavin, but I just think you need to be a little bit cuter there.
I think I'm agreeing it was wrong, just clearly wrong. But I'm kind of, as you know, I'm always one that's clutching at straws sometimes. But Gavin's relatively new to this level, so hopefully it's something that will come to him. But I think he should have been probably a bit wider out on that one. But he just made it wrong.
That one, I mean, I suppose the one thing in that regard was there was some contact, albeit Barrie McKay's initiated that contact by sort of forcing himself onto the leg, if you like. Whereas in the Hibs game against Dundee United, Chris Muller looks just to have, taken a quick Greg Louganis there, doesn't he? I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? Do you remember him?
I do.
He's too young.
No, I'm all done. Like hitting his head off the diving board on the way back down.
Yeah. But for you, total simulation there?
He's initiated the contact. I don't think that he's looked. I know Dougie's unsure with this one.
Wait to pounce.
I know. All right, Dougie, I'll let you go first.
No, because you just shoot me down. No, I think that there's not a lot of contact. I think that's fair to say. However, the contact is on the left knee of the attacking player as the ball's just moved away. I don't think there's a huge amount of contact there, but he's changing direction. I don't think it takes a lot for that player to be fouled. Whether he hits the deck and, in an elaborate fashion is down to the opinion of everybody who was watching. But I think the contact's far side from the referee. I think it's justifiable that he's not seen that, because it isn't a wild swing. It's not a tackle at pace or with any sort of crazy force. But I think there's contact there that's prevented that player from going through and continuing his attack. And that's why I think the penalty was the right call, but he's been booked for simulation.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Steve, would you think Muller was diving, or do you think he was fouled?
That was a dive.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear what Dougie's saying, and much to my own amazement, I'm agreeing with Des. Any contact that was made, it was initiated by the Hibs player. The defender had nothing to do with it. In my opinion, that one was called right.
Good call there, but not such a good call from Kevin Clancy up at Perth, unfortunately. 2 big decisions didn't go the way they should have done in that game. First of all, let's talk about Superman in the penalty area. I mean, that was quite a remarkable handball that wasn't given. Dan Cleary, I mean, I don't know how Kevin missed that one, Des.
I don't know. The only thing he was missing, he had the blue outfit on. All he was missing was a red cape. It was an arm ball. There was no player next to him. He's tripped of his own volition, and no, it's a penalty kick. You can't hide from that. That's just an obvious error. Unfortunately, Kevin just had one there.
It's one of those ones, though, with the handball law as it's written these days. I think the amendment previously, it had, if the arm was extended downwards, if you're falling and it hits it, it's legitimate. But they've amended that to a natural position for the action being performed. So if the player's fallen and he's put his arms down, I would say that's a natural reaction and it wouldn't be handball. But in this one, his elbow's off his body and he's actually, with intention, elbowed the ball. I don't know if maybe the referee's not been directly looking at it because it's a slip, so it's very difficult to anticipate. Maybe he's seen it peripherally, maybe he's not focused exactly on that player slipping, and that's why he's just not given it, assuming that the player's fell and it's hit his arm. It's natural, it's unfortunate, but let's move on. But on replay, you can see the arms came off the body to hit the ball. He's not used it to fall, support his body, and then it's hit it. So it should absolutely have been a penalty.
Oh, absolutely. That's as clear a penalty as we're going to get.
Totally.
And I would hate to say that it was a howler, but it looked at it. But again, a look at mitigation. I mean, you saw the highlights, and again, I might be clutching at straws with this one, but there was definitely movement across, Kevin, from a couple of players.
That's what I'm
maybe
saying.
Just before it.
But what I'm saying is the player who committed the handball slipped. And you can't anticipate that. That's something that's, you're not looking for that type of action to happen. And if his view has been obstructed at the same time, even for that kind of flip, half second, he might just assume the ball's hit his arm as he's fallen to the ground accidentally, and that's why he's decided, although it's hit his arm, it's not a handball. It's
a reactive decision there, or non-decision by Kevin at that point, because as you say, the player has tripped, but that doesn't then take away the fact that it's been a foul and his hand,
he's deliberately
arm,
played
the ball,
it.
He's deliberately played it.
Yeah.
So Livingston can feel very, very hard done. 100%. And I know David Martindale. Sorry, I don't know David Martindale personally, but when I seen his interview, he was extremely upset, and quite rightly so, saying that this can cause amount of money and regarding where they're going to be. Yeah. So it does have far-reaching effects.
But I would have to say Kevin there must have been something obscure in his vision, whether it was just wrong anticipation or the players coming across him, because that was a howler.
Absolutely. I mean, it allowed St Johnstone to win the game, as you say, which is vital for them in their fight against relegation, of course. But like you say, Livingston trying to get top six for the third year running, which would be a fantastic achievement for a team of their stature. Another mistake in that one, unfortunately, for Kevin as well. A bit of a wild challenge, James Penrice on Shaun Rooney, big Shaun Rooney, the cup hero of last season. Mm-hmm. And it was so bad that the substitute behind the goal was holding his head in disbelief, Des.
And that was his own teammate that was in disbelief at it. Penrice is just obviously, he's out of control, he's fast, he's gone with his legs up. I don't understand why you cannot get that. I wouldn't be looking for anyone else to make that decision, the far side assistant, because it's so deep into the penalty area. Mm-hmm. The fourth official being 50, 60 yards away, the other assistant, it's unfortunate it's the referee's decision only, but again, you've got to be switched on. When the ball's going into the penalty area, you need to be alert and high alert. And that, I think even the sports scene guy said that it ticked every box. Mm-hmm. And we don't like to quote other people.
But, no.
But it did. It absolutely did. He's endangering the safety of an opponent, regardless behaviour, reckless behaviour. It's a red card.
It was Andy Shinnie, wasn't it? With his hands on his head.
Hands on his head. Yeah. It was an awful tackle, and even I can't put up any defence on that one. Sometimes it happens, but Kevin was obviously convinced of what he saw because he cautioned him. But no, every day that's a red card. It was. I
wonder if he's seen the full severity of the challenge, because when the challenge is made, which is on the touchline, the referee's on the 18-yard line in the box, so he's a full 18 yards away from it, and it's the left foot of the player going off the park that makes the challenge. And I think he's seen enough to know that it's a yellow card, but I would maybe doubt that through his position on the park as the challenge is made, has he seen the clear serious foul play attempt.
I would think from that one, and I know I'm always looking for mitigation, but in that one I really can't see it. He had a clear, unobstructed view of it. He's just called it wrong.
That's obviously two big mistakes in the game, Des. So from that point of view, talk us through the process. They'll be marked down for that then, Kevin, won't he? And will that impact his next employment or next appointment?
He'll obviously have negative comments within his report. Mm. Necessarily, I don't think on that one decision shouldn't necessarily put him down. Mm-hmm. It's like a player. If a player has a bad game, then you're allowed to regroup. You don't just drop them. Kevin's a safe pair of hands within the SPL. He's been there for a number of years. He's a good referee. Yep. He's a very intelligent guy as well. He's very personable, manable. I would hope that it wouldn't impact on him too greatly. Mm-hmm. Listen, put him into the championship or whatever. The difficulty for me there is it's the perception of other clubs. If Kevin Clancy then turns up at Club X and go, oh well, you're not in the top league anymore, why have you been put here? Mm-hmm. So I think they've got to back him. I would certainly hope so.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think Kevin said anything too drastic the rest of the season. Nobody's perfect, so he will get marked down from that one. If the powers that be agree with us, he'll be marked down for making two major errors. But I mean, it all depends. It's the same. Nobody dropped Terry Butcher when he scored a headed OG from virtually the halfway line. It's a mistake, and he's not had a good day at the office, but he's not done anything outrageous before. So I wouldn't be thinking that there would be any more sanction other than getting a mark that he wouldn't be happy with.
I would certainly hope not.
Well, let's go to a positive refereeing performance. We talked in the build-up to the Rangers-Celtic match that Willie Collum was the right man for the job. You both agreed. You thought he was going to be a safe pair of hands. And my goodness, it's one of the easiest derbies to have handled for many a year, Steve.
Yeah, I'll say, and I'm quite happy to say, I didn't think it would be quite as safe a pair of hands, but yes, he showed us all. But again, take slight issue. It's down to Willie and his team to make the game easy. I always say my mother could make an easy game very hard. So all credit to him. I think him and his team had a fabulous day, and they can be very proud of themselves. The
thing that I noticed, Des, and you might concur, is that he let the game go early in the game. He wasn't quick to pull out cards.
No, I totally agree with Steve. Again, something we don't always do. I thought Willie had a fantastic game yesterday. It's probably, and Steve's alluded to there, I wouldn't say the easiest game, because you can only make a game easy and hard for yourself. But I think Willie 5-6 years ago may have jumped in a little bit earlier with cautions, but he was feeling the game. He was letting players find their feet. He was letting a couple of things go, and you could see him. He was working all the time. You could see him constantly talking to players. He was passing them by. And the fact that it took for 41 minutes for the first caution in an Old Firm game, that's quite unprecedented in recent years.
Absolutely.
But I also think you've got to give Willie all the credit in the world. When that caution did come, everybody knew it was a caution. Nobody complained. Lundstrom got straight up, walked away, no complaints. The crowd, the management, everybody else. So I think from that moment in time, everybody knew that, yeah, Willie was in control.
And I think it goes back to reading the temperature of the game, and that goes down to the players as well. Both sets were in control. There was no nastiness, there was no nasty challenges, there was no reason for him to go for the yellow card early on to try and control a player or a team at any point. And in doing so, it allowed the players to go and challenge and compete without that fear of being booked all the time, and allowing the game to continue to play around and, not stop all of the time. And that contributed to a really competitive and open game of football.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, and we've said before on here, all credit to both sets of teams and management, because a couple of incumbents ago from both, they wouldn't have been as well behaved as that. And I know we're commending people for behaving like adults, but we all know that is rare these days.
It was, like you say, it was fairly incident-free. There were 3 potential penalty incidents in the match. The first one, the ball strikes Cameron Carter-Vickers' arm from Ryan Jack, sort of attempted shot, and immediately Willie said it was not a penalty. Are you comfortable with that decision?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think the pace the ball was coming at Carter-Vickers from Ryan Kent, what's your opportunity to get your arm out the road? And no, that's not a penalty.
Yeah, his hand is natural, or his arm is natural positioned. It couldn't be any closer to his body, and it hit the arm high up on the arm. It actually hit his sleeve, and as the law states currently, it's from the arm hitting down that the arm is considered to be illegally used. So higher up on the arm, above that, it's a reasonable part of the body for the ball to strike. So I don't think there's anywhere in the law that would qualify that as a handball.
No, agreed. Absolutely. Nothing to add.
I don't think any Rangers player even claimed for it.
Well, they maybe had a wee half look. But
I think Ryan Jack put his arm up, but he would do, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
of
course he did. That's natural, but no, nothing.
Actually, that was the second incident. The first one was when Dyson Maeda was going through on goal. Alan McGregor came out, tried to attack the ball, and then he did actually catch Maeda with his trailing leg after the ball had gone away. Was that a penalty for you, Des?
Again, no. Maeda, he tried to dribble, very, very fast feet, which he must be credited for. But when the contact was made, he wasn't in control of the ball, and he wasn't going to get control of the ball. So no, not a penalty for me.
No, I agree, and I think, and I know Dougie's maybe going to say different.
No,
but for me, McGregor came out perfectly reasonably for a goalie. You all see them. He's maybe not quite as good at it as Craig Gordon, but that's how goalkeepers come out and make challenges. No, I'm absolutely perfectly happy with that.
I totally agree with that in entirety. I think McGregor has come out and controlled. I think he's spread himself fairly what you would expect a keeper to do. He's not played in a manner that would endanger Maeda, so I think everything about his attempt to win it is fair and reasonable. I think the only thing that could have changed the complexion of that decision and maybe put a magnifying glass on it is if Maida's touch wasn't off to the right hand side and then as a result not being in control of the ball. If he'd have maybe got there and nicked it under McGregor and was then unable to kind of hurdle him or go round him because of the contact, that then might bring it into the conversation for it being a justifiable penalty. But Maida, in stretching for that ball and using his pace to get there, touching the ball away and losing contact is probably one of those mitigating factors that contributes to it not being a penalty, although there was reasonable contact.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. But I think we have to mention as well that it looked as though Maida had a couple of steps away from the incident before he thought about going down.
Don't know. I think he's maybe the half step. I think you've been harsh, Stevie.
Trying to buy it, you think?
Well, that's a good expression. Yeah, we'll have that one.
And there was another incident, a Rangers incident, where looks like Carter Vickers has got a handful of Connor Golson's shirt. And it's one I know it happens a lot in the penalty area, but it looked pretty blatant at the time. Maybe if he'd gone down, he might have got that one, Des.
I mean, it happens you just said it there, it happens all the time. There's jostling and pushing and pulling. When you see it in slow motion, you see how much of a grab he did have, potentially. But at that minute in time, no, I wouldn't be going for it.
Let me tell you something. It's one of those things that happens all the time in these environments that the referee is never going to see because he's looking at other things that are more important. You know, he's focusing on the ball, where the ball is going to go, etc. That's out of the line of sight. It's something that the referee's just never going to see. An incident occurred in the English Premier League this weekend where the player was wrestled to the ground and VAR picked up on it. Now, it was nowhere near the ball or the corner that was being swung in. The ball wasn't going anywhere near it. He was about 10 or 15 yards behind it toward the back of the 6-yard box. VAR picked it up and gave the penalty. And I think it was a great decision, and it is one of those things that referees just don't see. I think in that Old Firm match there at the weekend, if VAR was active, it would probably look at that, and there's certainly a decision to be made.
But we only got it from one side. We didn't see what was going on the other side. And to be fair to Willie, he had that view.
Of course.
And it looked... Was it Golson?
Yeah.
He looked as though he had a hold of him from the other side as well. I'm sure that picture exists.
That was my circumstance. I'm going to say, you're seeing two players there. What's going on with the other 10, 12 that are in the penalty area at the same time? So if you're going to isolate one incident, then you have to be 100% nailed on because that is not going to be the only challenge or coming together and conflict that's happening at that one point. It's going to be happening amongst everyone.
And that's why it is all if, buts and maybes, because I guess we don't have VAR in the game anyway, you know, so it's academic at this stage. But if that was the main thing that was going on in terms of being fouled in the area, then if VAR highlights that, there's a call for the referee to make, and it's up to him to decide at that point, okay, is this a penalty or not? Because there was a clear hold of his jersey.
Agreed.
Yeah, but the VAR, you would hope, would have a view from the other side as well.
Yeah.
And speaking out of ignorance, but I would be highly surprised if he didn't have a hold of Carter Vickers as well.
At some point.
Yeah.
Are we not thinking a wee bit back to the Morelos one at Dundee last week, when they were both pulling and pushing each other? It's pretty much a similar kind of case, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Somebody has a still from one angle and then somebody has a still from another angle.
Well, so thankfully there weren't too many talking points, if you like, from the game as such in terms of contentious decisions. But sadly, there were some shocking scenes at Ibrox yesterday, and something that has to really be stamped out in the game, Steve. It's bottles being thrown onto the park, shards of glass in Joe Hart's penalty area, which could have seriously injured a player. These are just terrible things we don't want to see in our game.
Absolutely beggars belief that could happen. That people think that that's a reasonable thing to do. First, there's a glass bottle being brought in, and I know it's impossible to closely examine everybody that goes into a pitch, but somebody's taken in a bottle and thought it was reasonable to fling broken bits of glass onto a football pitch. So that guy, and I've got absolutely no doubt with the CCTV and things that they've had in here, and everybody having season tickets, that there will be evidence of who threw that bottle. So that thug, in my opinion, should be imprisoned. He should certainly never be allowed anywhere near a football pitch again. And the 2 or 3 who are sitting beside that guy who saw him doing it are also as culpable as him, so they should have their season tickets taken off them, and they're absolute cowards.
Unless they come forward and identify them, which they haven't done so far.
They haven't done yet, but yeah, absolute cowards. And if they're sitting there squirreling about it, then that For God's sake, a sliding tackle in that bit of glass goes in somebody's eye. Unbelievable.
But that's the madness. The
Unbelievable.
mindset of the fan who threw that bottle. He's also thinking only about Joe Hart at that point.
Aye.
But he's forgetting that Kamal Roof could be going for a challenge to score the goal that could result in an injury, or the defender, or the referee slips, or anyone, anyone who could have to be on that park at any time.
Aye.
It could even be a physio coming on to treat somebody who's injured. It could be anyone. That is absolutely unacceptable. As Steve said, I'm in agreement that the guy who threw it, or man or lady, whoever threw this, it's the people around them. If they've not come forward, they're deeming that acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got your idiots on both sides, absolutely you do. But if I'm standing next to a game of football and I'm seeing someone throw a bottle onto the pitch aimed at any person or anyone, you've got to stand forward. You've got to come forward. And as Steve used the word, it's cowardly.
Yeah. And it wasn't an isolated incident. Sadly, just before at half time, one of the Celtic backroom staff, one of the physios, was hit in the head by a bottle coming from the main stand as they're trying to go up the tunnel at half time and required some treatment, Steve.
Absolutely same scenario, exact same words. It's shocking, it's criminal. They should be banned for the rest of their lives, and in my opinion, the people that watched them doing it and said nothing about it should also be banned for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and I think just to point out as well, the referee's role in cleaning up the pitch has to be commended. I mean, I guess he didn't have much of a decision to make on it, but the referee's priority before, during, and after the match, beyond the result or anything to do with the game, is the player's safety.
And I have to say it, and again commend them, and you can, again, commending people for for acting like adults. The Rangers players were looking for bits of glass in there as well.
Yeah, it was all dealt with very calmly and professionally. So no, and that's not just the refereeing team, but the Rangers stewards and Rangers ground staff as well, who made sure the place was safe to play.
I know, because in the build up to the game we talked about 99 and Hugh Dallas getting hit by the coin and that type of thing. We hoped that all of that had gone from our game, but it's reared its ugly head again, Steve. And I think there were some objects thrown at Jota as he tried to take a corner as well. A coin just missed him on that occasion, so
it's all shocking.
Real bad.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even talking about the Celtic side, and we know that something good happens to one team, it's automatically bad for the other. So before anybody gets up on their high horse, you talk about Hugh Dallas, and you saw how unacceptable it was when Neil Lennon got hit with something at Tynecastle. It's not acceptable at all, and again, I'm banging on. Whoever did it should be found, and they should be banned for life from ever going anywhere near a football pitch.
We've also seen, Des, some alarming footage today, actually, a different angle of the second Celtic goal. When they go to celebrate the goal, someone tries to come out of the old east enclosure in the main stand at Ibrox to go onto the pitch, and another supporter pulls him back. I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it?
It's absolutely bizarre, and I think the supporter, if you want to use that word, supporter, he can only be grateful that his colleague at the side him pulled him back. Why do people think they're allowed to go onto the field of play and attack a player? They're there for their entertainment. It's a game. You play your football, you play your 90 minutes, and you go back up the road. So, yeah, it's almost like going back to the dark days again. It's almost getting that way. And I really don't understand why. And I know they put the games on at 12 o'clock to try and discourage people from going to pubs, etc. But all they're doing is they're starting earlier or carrying on from the night before. So I don't know if there is an answer. I really, really don't. And it beggars belief that people still think these are acceptable acts to portray in 2022.
There have been a couple of incidents this season, Steve, not as serious, of course. I think it was Barrie McKay was hit by a plastic bottle at Celtic Park playing for Hearts. There was a pyro thrown from St Johnstone supporters against Dundee, and Lee Griffiths kicked it back into the crowd. Ended up in trouble himself when he was being targeted by the St Johnstone supporters. But this is the worst we've had for a while, isn't it? I mean, do you think that the authorities should be doing something about this?
Something in inverted commas, yeah, absolutely. Somebody should be doing something, because this just isn't acceptable. And it seems to be escalating. It's bad enough having a coin thrown at you. It's bad enough having a plastic bottle thrown at you. And I've mentioned before about being on a game in Athens and getting plastic bottles thrown at you. It's not nice. But when they're starting to throw on shards of glass, that's... And I can't believe I'm saying that about a game of football up here.
It's one of those ones. It's difficult to convey. I know you use it's one of the worst incidents. Escalating it from plastic bottles and whatnot, but there has to be just a blanket zero tolerance approach to throwing anything onto the park, because whether it's plastic bottles or something that isn't designed to cause any sort of significant harm, that then becomes the bar of what's acceptable. And there's always someone wanting to kind of push it that little bit further. And then that becomes the bar of acceptability. Then it goes a little bit further again, and before you know it, you are throwing glass bottles and shards of glass. I think whether it's something soft and fluffy or that doesn't cause any damage, if you're throwing anything onto the park, you need to be getting looked at and making it clear that nothing should be entering the field of play, because there is always some idiot somewhere who thinks, well, I'm going to do this then if you've done that.
Well, absolutely. And, sometimes you think, when you've won the league and people are throwing balloons on and all the rest of it, but who knows what's in that balloon when you stamp on it. So I see your point. It's all or nothing, so leave it at that.
The thing is, the SPFL will say they're waiting for the delegates' report to come in, Des. In your experience, that's usually within 24 hours after the final whistle, I'd imagine. So they should have it by now. You just wonder what they'll do with that information.
Sometimes I really wonder what the delegates report and how much that weight carries, because we don't really, we didn't get, we got a copy of it and we could see what was written, but
it's not got much to do with the referee though, has it? Really?
No,
it's not to do more with the conduct of the club and their measures and how they've controlled the environment.
But see, if you think
situation.
about it, for how many years have been talking about sectarian singing and things coming from the stand, and there's an observer or delegate at every single game, and it never gets raised. It never gets raised, ever gets raised. So is that saying then that the SFA are culpable in allowing it? I don't know.
Well, fair play. You hear it every week, but I don't know what the SPL delegates got to say differently from what we all saw, that there was shards of broken glass on the pitch. And what's the since when did they become legal representatives? Waiting for the SPL delegate. A piece of nonsense.
No,
we all saw it.
The government get involved when Ali McCoy and Neil Lennon had a wee contretemps on the side of the park. So why are they not getting involved when they can hear 40,000 people singing on either side, singing songs that aren't acceptable?
If the national associations get involved, and that goes to FIFA, because it's written, it's in the laws that you're just not allowed to have any influence. And we know some places that will happen, but the FIFA edicts are that there is no national interference with football associations. But that doesn't involve the police, who see absolute mindless idiots doing that, and it's got, as far as I can see, it's got absolutely bugger all to do with the SPL delegate.
The authorities tend not to take action in these situations. As you look historically, Scottish Cup final 2016, there's thousands of Hibs fans on. They're harassing Rangers players and officials, and Rangers fans come on, they start fighting each other, and nothing happened. There was no comeback to either club for that. There's been other instances, Motherwell fans, and I think it was a playoff game against Rangers the year before in 2015. They were charged, but no punishment was forthcoming. We have this problem, there's no strict liability in Scotland, like there is with UEFA, Steve, so maybe that's the get out for the authorities.
I don't. Do you know? I'm not awful sure that you use the word "get out." Is it something that we really need to look at now? Because fans, particularly, don't give a stuff if a club's fined $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. It makes no difference to them because they don't particularly see it. But if their team is docked 3 points, then 5 points, then 10 points, then 20 points, then maybe they will pay attention. And I've heard some of the ludicrous excuses for not doing it. That I wasn't at the game that day, it wasn't my season ticket. No luck. If it came from your seat and you've given your ticket away, you're getting done as well. Maybe it is time that the clubs were held responsible for it, because nothing else seems to be happening.
What would be a fair sanction, Des? Should there be a sanction against Rangers for what happened in that game?
That's for a far higher power than me to make that final decision. I think they've got to hold their hands up and say that they're responsible for what goes on in their house, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I would like to think that the fans will be identified, they'll be reprimanded, and season tickets taken off them. That's it, end of. But I think clubs are under a duty of power to look after anyone who's in their stadium, and that's just not acceptable.
Steve's talking about points deductions, but maybe even closing sections of the ground or that type of thing. Is that something you would sanction?
For me, I would go down the points deduction. because I think that's where it'll hurt the team and it'll hurt the fans even more. If you're going to take this as a serious issue, then that's what it'll come. If you close a section of the stand, you're still going to have 35,000 people there. So what you're missing out in fans, players won't really, that won't affect them. We've played through a lockdown for 2 years with no fans in the stadium, but if you've got a points deduction, then the players feel that. And the players, if they're feeling that, then
the fans will. And that's the thing I was just about to say. If it's a closure, it's temporary, they'll be back in. And if you lose your season ticket, you can get one off of a mate probably. Pick one up outside the stadium, often cases. Still find your way into the stadium, I'm sure. But, if these fans, if you want to call them that, are so genuinely motivated by the success of their club, are faced with their club receiving an actual sporting sanction, i.e. losing points, then that might be the motivator for them not doing something so stupid next time.
But I wouldn't do it now against Rangers. I don't think that would be fair. But you quote this incident and you highlight this incident and say from next season, if there's a repeat, you get points taken off you. That's why I agree with what the guys have said. Money doesn't matter, closing the stand doesn't matter. Take points off. I think because if you're going to lose the league or you're going to potentially get relegated because you're a cretin, it's the only way to do it.
Well, the justification would be if anything happens in that stadium that compromises the safety of the team that's playing against that club, then, and whatever team it is, whether it's Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, it doesn't matter. If you are a fan of Club A and you throw something onto the pitch and you threaten Club B from being able to compete of sound mind, maybe playing through fear. I mean, if you're Joe Hart, at the back of your mind you must be thinking, God, the next dive I could have a bit of glass in my elbow here.
Absolutely.
Now, fortunately it never happened and it's not impacted the game as far as he's concerned, but if you do something that could compromise the ability of the other team to play safely for that 90-minute period, then there should be a sporting penalty.
You're also compromising the safety of your own players.
Your own players, right?
So I think if the SFA, SPFL, whoever are going to do it, they have to reference this and use this as the line in the sand and say, look, this is what happened here. From now on, so Steve rightly said, from next season, then all bets are off. Every club, whether it be Celtic, Rangers, Livingston, they know this will be the sanction and this will be the deterrent in what will happen to you.
Because we're talking about escalation, and I can't remember who did the song, but if you tolerate this, then your children will be next. What's the next step that we tolerate that we don't have any action against? It's scary enough to people to think that people did this. What's the next thing?
Yep.
It's just shocking.
No, for sure. Perhaps Rangers might have handled it better. They still haven't publicly condemned the actions of their supporters on this occasion, other than a short statement from their supporters liaison officer who says they've asked supporters to try and, if they know anything about it, to contact Police Scotland. So it seems surprising communications from me.
It's a bit flimsy, isn't it? It's very flimsy. I'm not wanting to put Rangers under the bus or anything like that, but I think that because it was so public and so viewable all across Britain, I mean, this is not just going to Scotland, it's going to England, it's going across the world, and you've got a shard of a bottle of beer sticking out your grass, potentially severely injuring someone. I would have liked to have thought that Rangers would have acted a lot quicker and taken an official statement rather than just through the supporters liaison.
Yeah, we're commending them for how they dealt with the actual glass and Rangers players helping to pick it all up. But that statement's pathetic.
Yeah.
Paying lip service and nothing more.
Absolutely. A bit of a sorry afternoon, sadly, in that regard, but we can move on to the VAR situation, lads, because it's just been released that the SPFL will hold a meeting on the 19th of April. All 42 clubs are to vote on the introduction of technology from next season. We need 75% to back it in each division for it to go through. So I'm surprised why all 4 divisions are voting on it, but we guess that's because there's the possibility of promotion for each club, so ultimately they would be affected by it. So first of all, are you happy this vote's taking place, Steve, and are you hopeful that VAR will be introduced?
Yes and yes. Thank how many times have we mentioned it here, but thank God they're getting around to doing something about it.
Yep.
But why on earth is it taken as long as this? And I hope that is the herald of it coming in, but by all accounts they're talking about taking the vote and it's going to come in at Christmas, next Christmas.
Yes.
You can't bring it in halfway through, not even halfway, you can bring it in when you're coming thinking about the top and the bottom 6. What's the logic in that?
I don't see how you can't change the laws of the game halfway through a season. you can't all of a sudden say, well, this was acceptable then, it's not acceptable now. So if you are Club A and you have an offside goal scored against you or a penalty kick decision went for you or against you in November, it should be the same in March and April.
Absolutely.
And again, it really does strike of playing at it. They're not doing it properly. If you're going to bring it in from day one, or if you say you're going to trial it, okay, just be open and tell people, right, we're going to trial it for the next 6 months, 7 months at down the divisions, so to speak, and have it ready for the following year. But you can't bring something in January when you don't have it in August. That's two separate games. It's a different sport entirely then.
Absolutely. It has to be played under the same circumstances as the game earlier on. So the week before VAR's in, you've seen some of the incidents we've talked about, and nothing happens. And the next week we're changing everything drastically. No, it's madness.
I mean, I wonder if their rationale behind that, or their justification, is that the law itself isn't being changed. The laws that the game actually are played to are being consistent. It's just that VAR is going to assist in certain things that might have been missed, not be missed.
You're changing the fundamentals of the game, though, that you're allowing.
I'm just saying, I wonder if this is the get around.
Well, it is, because they're not changing the rules, but you are changing how a game is governed, and it's good as changing the rules, because you're playing under a separate set of circumstances from the game last week.
Yeah, listen, I totally agree. I think there has to be consistency across the full season, because there will be some massive decision at some point in the first part of the season that won't go noticed because we don't have VAR, and then it wouldn't surprise me if that one big incident that didn't get picked up because of VAR then is the hinge between a team finishing second or third, or first and second.
You can guarantee, if there is that situation, the team that ends up relegated or the team that doesn't get through in a cup semi-final, they will go to town on it.
Sod's law.
They will go to town on it, and it will happen. 1 point
between a position, a bit of relegation, top six, bottom six, or whatever, and it's a penalty that was given that shouldn't have been, and we didn't have VAR to kind of check it out. But I guess, as I say, the SFA might be looking at this thinking, well, the laws as they're applied and as the game is going to be getting adhered to won't be changing whether or not VAR is implemented. So,
well, but we've waited this long, and we've all seen the lists of the top 25 countries in Europe and all the rest of it in weird language. Anyway,
2 out of 25.
Aye, 2 out of 25, something like that. Why not? If you're going to bring it in at Christmas, why not just bite the bullet, admit we've made a complete arse of it, leave it another 6 months, bring it in at the start of the next season?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If they're going to use it, then trial it, tell everyone you're going to do. I think the biggest thing is just the communication that comes from the SFA and the SPFL not telling you what their intentions are. So we've got this statement today saying that 75% of each clubs in each of the divisions, which I'm not a mathematician, but surely if it's 75% of each division, just be all 42 telling you what the other is. Just bring it in next year. If you're going to do that, trial it, have tests, show them the results, show what's the percentage of things getting right, what's the percentage of things getting wrong, and your justification, or just come straight in and do it. You can't do it half-hearted.
You wonder why it's taken them this long to actually schedule a meeting, Steve, for the clubs to vote in the first place. I mean, I'm assuming they've finally crunched the numbers and come up with a number that they think the clubs will buy into. And what about the prospect of clubs voting against it? That would be fairly disastrous, wouldn't it?
Well, it sounds like it. And
imagine
no disrespect, but if we need 75% of the teams in League Two, and we don't know, and we're talking out of ignorance out of this, we don't know who's been asked to pay what, but if the teams in League Two say, well, I'm going to get this every 5 years when we draw Celtic in the third round of the Cup, be buggered if I'm paying 20 grand for it. So if nobody in League Two votes for it, or less than 75, that's it scuppered.
Which seems absolute madness, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're the ones that are going to be less affected by it. But again, I'll go back to something I mentioned a number of weeks ago. If every club is budgeting for the worst season possible, whereas they don't progress through cups, they don't get promoted, etc., then just take it off their prize budget and go from there. But yeah, I can't imagine many two league clubs going to say, yeah, we want VAR when they're never going to use it.
You'd like to think, Steve, that they've obviously gone round all the Premiership clubs and the Championship clubs, and they've probably got the buy-in from them before they have their meeting. I mean, surely they wouldn't be as unprepared as that.
I was going to say, complete that sentence.
I think the word "think"
wouldn't bet the mortgage on it. You would assume and you would assume that somebody's spoken to League One and League Two, but I wouldn't be surprised. I really wouldn't. And as Des said, it's 75% in each league. If you want it passed, it's 75% of the 42. And I don't know where 75% came from, but if they're settling on that, it's 75% of the clubs.
It does seem strange, but fingers crossed. We'll keep our eyes across that one. And in that regard, actually, I was talking about testing. An under-14s game at the weekend was used as a test game. 2 of our top officials were involved. And it turns out that 2 big decisions were overturned by VAR.
Allegedly, is my information. I know they've got to try it somewhere, but apparently it was used through Hearts and Hamilton.
Yes,
I think it was
under 14s,
and apparently
at the Orium.
And there was 2 penalty decisions. I can't say for categorical definite that whether it was penalties for or penalties against, but it just shows you if you're needing VAR for an under 14 game, what is it going to be like if they stick it straight into the SPL? So there's teething trouble here. Dougie might know a wee bit more.
I don't know. I would just assume at that level they're figuring out how the technology works, how to interact with one another, what the processes are, and just going through the kind of step by step kind of processes that they need to understand when VAR has to be activated and when it is, what do they do and how do they communicate it. So.
By text.
We've said there's going to be we're going to make mistakes, and there's no way around that. And no offence to the kids playing in the under 14 game, I'd much rather we overturned 2 penalties in the under 14 game rather than 2 penalties at the weekend there. And if we don't know if those calls were right or they were wrong, but we've got to start somewhere.
I think you've got to take the positives, the fact that they're now trialling it.
Yeah,
I think that's the big thing. Look, we've got the technology to use. Let's start it. So we're in the early days of April. We've got a good number of months to roll it out. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to, and hopefully we'll learn from them quickly.
Yep.
Absolutely. Listen, thanks again, guys, for joining us tonight on Get Involved Referee. Don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and give us some videos and little pointers you want us to follow up, and we'll mention them in the next programme.